Hi, everybody. Harry here to talk about the reports that the Trump administration is thinking about new indictments of Jim Comey and Letitia James in the wake of the dismissals of the previous indictments because the U.S. attorney, the so-called U.S. attorney, Lindsay Halligan, was appointed unlawfully, and her signature at the bottom of the indictments is akin to no signature at all. She's a sort of pretend prosecutor. Okay, they have said they're going to appeal, and they said it right away, and the White House said it, which was already sort of head spinning because the White House is not supposed to be the one that decides on appeals. It's supposed to be the Solicitor General. As it turns out, they have not actually filed the appeal in the Halligan and Comey cases, and presumably the SG is thinking about this. There are 3 or 4 different cases posing the same issue, and they want to, or normally a thoughtful Solicitor General would decide about the order and the best cases and the facts and the like. And very importantly, just yesterday, the Third Circuit, which is the Court of Appeals above the District of New Jersey, affirmed the decision of the District Court of New Jersey that Alina Habba, another kind of loyalist person just chosen for her, being the Roy Cohn figure to Trump, the Third Circuit said she also was not appointed lawfully, a similar kind of ruling, and a pretty high up one, including from 2 Republican appointees. So they are, for starters, looking at this mess and trying to figure out what to do about it. Now, whether or not they lose the appeal, I think it's likely that they would want to do, and I've said this from the start, a new indictment, because among other things, recall the bumbling set of mistakes and, from what we can infer, grave misconduct by Halligan in the grand jury, and that stink follows the case around as long as they don't do a new indictment. So she apparently misinformed the grand jury about Comey's Fifth Amendment rights and misinformed them to be assured that there's more evidence out there. Really rookie and fundamental mistakes that I think bespeak a combination of inexperience and just a desire to bring Trump the scalps at any cost. Okay, so that's the idea of a new indictment. I think there's no way that these indictments wind up going, all the way. So even if they get the green light that says, notwithstanding what all the courts have said, these are valid appointments, I think you would still see a superseding indictment, certainly of Comey and probably of James. But doing it now, and that's the kind of calibrated decision that is now being reported. They're mulling it over. It makes it's no surprise, and I said it then, that they would mull it over. But there's a lot to mull. For starters, maybe most importantly, we're talking now in the Eastern District of Virginia, a suburb of D.C. It's very likely that a grand jury would know about the whole mess. You're not excluded from serving on the grand jury. And man, oh man, as embarrassing as it was that their political efforts to stick Halligan in were legally ineffective and kind of overextended, for a grand jury to actually not approve the true bill would be just a total, shellacking of the whole effort. And remember, in the Comey case, there was 3 counts proffered, and the grand jury only went for 2 of them, and then by a really narrow margin, 14 votes, at least that's the report, when you have to have 12. So it's a really concrete risk. And I think serious enough that one possibility, especially if they were to lose on appeal, is to just, pack up their bags on the whole thing and blame the crazy radical liberal courts or whatever sort of, bogus mantra they bring out when they lose cases. But there's still more, because for Comey, if they bring a new indictment and they do it right in the grand jury, I think, and I've written about this as well, they're going to be running into the freight train of the statute of limitations, because the reason Halligan hurried up so much and was so thoughtless about it all, and just even though they told the court, she made her own independent determination. I think it's really clear that Trump said jump and she said how high. The statute of limitations was set to run a couple days after the indictment, and I believe I've written about this as well. Was in the minority at first. I think I'm in the majority now, and maybe even the very large majority, people who recognize that the statute that the Trump administration would rely on to say we have another 6 months doesn't work in a case like this, where the indictment, there wasn't a technical defect. It basically, in the eyes of the law, never happened. It's just a nullity. And in that situation, I think they would be running right into loss of a statute of limitations. That would be, not quite as bad as the jury saying we're not going to return the charges, but pretty bad. And then as to both, you bring a new indictment, and even if you clean up the record, you have staring at you like, if the first is a freight train, this is a Mack truck, the motions of both James and Comey for selective vindictive prosecution. That was the very argument that was being held in front of Nachmanoff at the time that the gobsmacking revelation that Halligan hadn't even presented the operative indictment to the grand jury, had just kind of relied on, well, they voted for these two before, so we can just tear off this page, renumber, etc. An argument that Comey counsel, various well-respected counsel, Michael Dreeben, jumped up and made, and now they filed a motion saying there's no indictment, period, because there's no indictment in the file. That would be another thing they could clean up if they did a superseding indictment. But the big thing that they can't clean up is the selective vindictive prosecution. And I would say to a grand jury refusing the charges, that's pretty big. But so is a finding by the courts of what would be, breathtaking and maybe unprecedented demonstration of complete weaponization of the Department of Justice. You did this because Trump told you to, because Comey and James are his political enemies. What an indictment, a lasting indictment of everything about this Department of Justice. So a new indictment now, they could bring it, but they'd be running headlong into this very motion. We saw Comey arguing in court, and it was looking like the wind was definitely blowing in his direction. James's argument she would have to mount her own, but if anything, Trump's record of really just pillorying her and treating her as a political enemy is stronger. And remember, if that's the reason for the prosecution, it doesn't matter if there's even, some validity or total validity. That is a constitutional violation in and of itself without regard to the evidence. So here they are. The appeal is going up supposedly, but they have to figure out how to juggle the different things. If they're ever going to get to a conviction, I think they're going to need to do a superseding indictment. and there's reason to do it right away, keep it going. I think otherwise it's going to be a long time until the appeal actually runs its course from the Judge Curry decision. Maybe even, past the midterms, and then everything changes. But on the other hand, man, oh man, this has been so disreputable an effort, and it's really pretty clear what's going on. Maybe they decide, let's try to do that until, and hope for some kind of change of vibe with respect to these cases. But if they do bring them, and, to my mind, that would be the normal impulse of the Department of Justice. Well, this is going to take a while to work out. Let's just do a new indictment and go forward. They are running into 1, 2, 3 different buzzsaws that may moot that whole appeal, because it may result in the outright dismissal with prejudice of both indictments and a complete debacle, and it justifiably for a blatantly political weaponized prosecution, only because Trump says so and he doesn't like Comey and James. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.